Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Steve Grasso, Senior Editor of Prevue, and I'll be your moderator for the next hour. I'm thrilled to welcome Alan Ransner, Managing Partner and Co-founder of Impact for Good, and a leading voice in the corporate social responsibility movement, as well as our two panelists, Joanna Behrens, President, Sustainable Events Network, and Jacqueline Bernstein, President and Owner, Empire Force Events. Many thanks to our sponsors for today's webinar: Naples, Marco Island, Everglades Convention and Visitors Bureau, Visit Dallas, and Visit Alexandria. Today's session will be recorded and you'll receive a link via email, so don't worry if you miss something. As with all previous webinars, you'll receive CEUs from the Events Industry Council for your participation. And speaking of participation, please do jump in with questions or comments, which you can type right into your question box, and we'll hold a Q&A at the end of the session. The CSR experts at Impact for Good have prepared a white paper that expands on some of the material that we'll cover today, and you can download that from your console under the handout section. So let's start with Alan, who will explain a bit about his background and his philosophy on the 4 Ps of CSR.
All right, thanks, Steve. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here, especially with Joanna and Jackie. We got a great conversation we're going to have here about corporate social responsibility and what's going on in this events world here and team building. And we're glad that you're here with us. I know that the 3 of us are pretty excited about it, and we're glad that you've taken the time to join us. I can tell you from my part, yes, I'm one of the co-founders of Impact for Good. We basically connect corporations in the community wherever they gather. We've been doing this for 17 years as of this summer, and we're really into bringing community service to our clients, whether they're at an event destination or they could be in their home office, their home city, whatever it is, helping people make a difference. And I'm excited for it. Obviously, Jackie and Joanna are going to share their background too. We got a lot of experience on this panel here. So what we're going to start with is I'm going to talk for the first bit here about CSR and about what we call the 4 Ps. Okay, the 4 Ps of giving back here, redefining the meaning of team building through corporate social responsibility here. So first thing is to know is that if you're a first timer here, it's easier than you think, okay, to make an impact through your events. And we're going to talk about what we call the 4 Ps here. And you can take those 4 Ps, and there's many different ways to make these programs successful, and you got to kind of do it your way to make it work. But we're going to give you some of our guidelines that we think help make for a successful CSR event. Those 4 Ps we're going to discuss today include the following. They include purpose, which is a purposeful tie-in, we like to say, to issues in the world at large, things that are happening in our community, or causes that are tied uniquely to your organization or those who are gathering. The next P, once you have that one figured out, is going to be powerful impact. And the powerful impact your events can have on the community partners, basically to help them achieve their goals and objectives. And I'm talking about the who you're impacting in that sense, the nonprofits that you're going to be actually impacting. Of course, you got to wrap those together with professional implementation and professional sharing of that message. Okay, making sure that this isn't just a checkbox type of experience here, like, yeah, we made a difference, but really making this professional delivery, which of course is all tied together with this passionate connection that you're making between yourselves and the community. But I think that one of the things that it's really important to touch on first is the fact that, yes, we're still talking about CSR, okay? I say still because this topic hit the webinars and hit the meetings industry a long time ago, okay? We've been talking about this for a long time. And I do get asked sometimes by writers say, hey, are we still talking about this? Is this still a thing? Are people really still doing this? I can tell you from our company perspective, we're busier than ever, especially post-pandemic. People really like to make an impact. I think it's something in our human nature where people really do want to do good in the world. And we see that even during the pandemic, we actually volunteerism, adult volunteerism actually was at 30%, like 30% of adults in America, in the US, were volunteering, which is a pretty high number when you think of 3 out of 10 and all the challenges that were out there during the pandemic, right? That's from a stat from Volunteering in America, a report that came out, and it really shows that people still wanted to make a difference during these trying times. We talk about trying times. These last few years, I know we're talking about P's here. I'd be remiss not to mention the other P word, pivot, right? We all pivoted. Everyone's favorite pandemic word, pivot. And we all had to make changes in our lives. And when we did, we had to change just the way we did basically everything, personally, of course, professionally as well. That said, nonprofits, wow, they got hit real hard. They really did. Nonprofits got hit extremely hard. I mean, think about it. If you've done a charity walk, maybe a 5K, right? Maybe a golf outing, some sort of an auction. A lot of the times those things happen in the spring, right? And the reason for that is because they need to generate the funds they need for the year. And so a lot of times that's why those things happen early in the year. Obviously in 2020, that didn't really happen, did it? No. And you got to a point where midsummer 2020, you had a situation where the nonprofit world was losing $3 billion. You ready for this? Per week. It's unbelievable. It's unfathomable. And that was a stat from just the summer of 2020. So the point is that fortunately we have so many companies and individuals, I should say first, that are willing to give their time, make sure that nonprofits can stay whole. Because while the needs of nonprofit neighbors went up, programming and staff went down, and so it really left communities in a bit of disarray when you think of how important the nonprofits are. But look, the fact is that corporations, they play a big part in giving back to the community. Although I will tell you that during the pandemic years, it's been harder. I mean, a lot of times we see the corporate donations, they kind of go in line with kind of where stock prices are and I guess and performance. And you think of supply chain issues and other challenges during the pandemic. Donations did go down on the corporate level, which was very difficult. But that's something that stands in contrast with what employees want. I just want to bring that up too, because when you look at the reason that companies do corporate social responsibility, what they get involved in it, you have your sales side, okay? It's very good for consumers to, of course, know that they're buying from a company that cares. And there's stats that go behind that from the sales and marketing side. Consumer retention. Hey, you're more prone to buy a product from a company that cares than one that does not, okay? That's just how the society works. But the other side of it is also employee retention. Because in terms of employee retention, there are a lot of stats out there about how employees really want to not just find a place to work, but they want to find more than just a paycheck. They want more meaning in their work, okay? And they're looking at their company's overall philanthropic mission and how they actually put those values into action as part of their happiness and part of staying on the job. So when a company has a proven track record of supporting social impact causes, it actually leads to employees wanting to stick around, especially the younger generation, wanting to stick around because it fulfills them in a different way. There was a Deloitte study that said that aligning with Gen Z and millennial values is so important. Nearly 2 in 5 say they have rejected a job or assignment because it did not align with their values. Meanwhile, those who are satisfied with their employees' societal and environmental impact and the efforts to create a diverse and inclusive culture are more likely to want to stay with their employer for more than 5 years. I mean, there's a reason why you're hearing that term employee engagement again and again and again with employers. They really know that it's really important to drive employee engagement and the pride and loyalty that an employee has in their company for feeling good about doing something for others is a big driver in employee engagement. So just keep that in mind when you're kind of putting events together, the employees who are part of these experiences, they want this, okay? They really do. They want to be a part of making a difference because it really is important to them. Now, I could honestly go on and on talking about stats and reasons why CSR is so important and continues to be. But we're going to talk really more specifically now about the 4 Ps here in terms of how we, of course, associating them with team building and really just making a difference through your events. So let's talk with the first one that we always want you to consider when you're talking, when you're trying to figure out, what am I gonna do, okay? And that's the purpose side here. Listen, you definitely have to do things that make sense for who you are as a company. And there are things that I think it used to be years ago. It was like, okay, well, let's just wouldn't it be cool if, okay? And the wouldn't it be cool if is important, but we want to make sure that we're making our CSR matter. And what I mean by that is you have different ways we look at it. We're going to look at it by industry and also by causes, as I mentioned earlier, the idea of issues in the world at large. When things happen in the world, you have an opportunity to make a difference, okay? For example, when there's a natural disaster, okay, when there is a war and there are displaced people, when those are instances when your events can make an instant impact on on those communities, and really by making it applicable to those causes, when you get that purpose right there and hit that right, it's going to be something where a lot of times employees are like, wow, I would have loved to have done something, but what do I do? But then all of a sudden they do something under the company name at an event that makes a difference and gives back to that cause, makes them really feel great about who it is that they work for, and that they were able to make that difference. Also, in addition to just those kind of picking a cause by virtue of those kind of the things that are happening in the news, so to speak, the other side is making it applicable, making that purpose applicable to who you are as a company and to the attendees. It's kind of two separate things. You see that in like pharmaceutical companies, for example, that might be giving back to kids and during treatment for illnesses in the hospital. A restaurant chain that's combating hunger, okay? Those kinds are great tie-ins that are it's gonna be more exciting for those attendees when it's within their industry. It's not gonna say that if you're working for a pharmaceutical company, you don't wanna feed the hungry. But you see what I'm saying? It ends up being an impactful experience when it's in their industry, so to speak. Another thing to keep in mind is, what do the participants do? If you have a group of salespeople, they're going to be fired up about competition. We know that, right? But what if you have engineers Like engineers would be really excited about the next generation of engineers. For example, STEM education. Doing a program that involves giving kids tools that they need to learn more about science, technology, engineering. Let's not forget about arts and math, STEAM education, as we call it. And those are the kinds of events that can really speak to the attendee in a different way and make it a more memorable experience. Again, we're going to give examples of talk about with Jackie and Joanna. We're going to go through each of these 4 Ps and talk about examples after this, but we're just going to continue on here talking about the different Ps here. The next P, once you've figured out what that cause is going to be, is your impact. This one is really important, folks, okay? Really important, okay? Because when it comes down to this P here, just because it sounds meaningful to you, no disrespect, you've come up with a great idea, right? But make sure it's gonna be meaningful for who you're donating to, okay? When you have I think long ago, it used to be a common thing in incentive trips where, oh, well, we're gonna get a group from the local orphanage to come and sing to us. What are we doing for those kids in the orphanage? Can we do more? And so we want to make sure that you are meeting your goals and objectives. Like, that's really important there, okay? But because we have to wear our meeting planner hats, don't we? We got to make sure that we got the logistics and we got the budget, we got the time period, we got the room set up, we got all that kind of stuff. But you got to make sure that the needs of the beneficiaries are being met, okay? Just because you have a great idea of a program that can make an impact, make sure that that is going to be something that the beneficiary that you want to donate to actually wants to receive, okay, can put to good use. That's a really important thing. We like to say that we're needs-based. I like to tell this to clients all the time, right? We're needs-based because for your needs, your goals and objectives, but also for the nonprofits that you're donating to. Because if you miss the boat there, then you're gonna be donating something that might not be going to the right organization. It might be better suited going somewhere else. So make sure that, of course, that you are meeting the goals of your nonprofits there as well. There, we'll talk more about kind of how some of the examples of that in just a bit. We're going to go to our next P here, which is going to be passion. Okay, passion is is really important here. Okay. Excuse me. This is passion as a you know what, I think I might have just skipped a slide. Let me go back here for a second. The powerful limit. Oh, okay. Apologize. We're good there. Okay. Going back here where we were. Okay. So we're talking about now oh, you know what, folks, I am seeing that I missed a slide that I'm sharing. Okay. Really what I want to talk about is the next one is is the professional delivery of the message. That's the one my slide that I skipped here. I apologize. But that one with the professional delivery, this is really important too, guys. This really, you have this great cause that you want to get out there, right? And you know that the program is going to make an impact, but you have to make sure that the delivery of that message is done in a way that it really touches people. Okay, it really makes sure that they don't walk away saying, yeah, my company did some good. Okay, but that they really feel like they were a part of it. And this is where that professional delivery of the message really makes it, really matters there. Okay, because the driving force behind any sort of activity is going to be that heart and soul of the participant and how much they really attach themselves to it. And that's where it's really important and difference making for that facilitator to be able to, to start up conversations that are guided in a way that allows people to share with one another, making sure that seeing if they can put themselves into, the kind of a situation. Imagine if, you were that kid who, or imagine if it was your house that, and really trying to really put this kind of an image in the participant's head that can try and get them to understand the true impact they're going to have. It's really difficult, okay? But the right facilitator in making it happen is key here, okay? That's why it's like getting facilitators who are trained in kind of in audience engagement and understanding corporate social responsibility goals, understanding not just reading a blurb about a nonprofit, but truly getting to understand what they're all about is really important, so that message can be shared in an authentic way, and doesn't really make the whole experience feel like just kind of like a checkbox. Hey, this was our kind of, we did our give back and now we're good. Okay, so let's move now to our final one, which the slide of course still says next to me here, which is just this is kind of like that final P, where it's like everything needs to be wrapped in passion. Okay, and this is really where you need to make sure that that the experience is that when you're bringing this group together, that you're of course reinforcing this goal of connecting to one another, but connecting to the community as well. Making that happen, there's many different ways that certainly you can make that happen, but making sure that there are direct connections to the audience that you are giving back to. Making sure, in other words, make sure that they can truly understand who that organization is that's receiving it, even down to the individual at that organization that might be receiving something. Again, we'll give examples shortly here, but making sure that you remind them that this program that they've just experienced is something that can extend outward into their community no matter where they live. Okay, and that then let them know that, like, leveraging that kind of that compassion that they have, and that we like to say the reservoir of hope that the attendees have to be a force for good and change, that it really is something that they can put into action. Okay, so this activity can be a catalyst. It can be that starter that can get them involved in societal change. So these are the types of things that we like to consider, again, with these 4 Ps. The idea of, again, of the making sure you're picking the right cause, be that something that's happening around the world, around your community, or because your organization has a special tie to it. Then making sure that you're going to have an impact that's good for you guys, meeting your goals and objectives, but also meeting the goals and objectives of the nonprofits you're donating to. Implementing it in a professional manner, with really getting that message across, and of course, again, giving it in such a passionate way that it's a catalyst for really bridging the gap between corporation and community beyond the actual event itself. So that's kind of the end of my discussion of the 4 Ps here, and I know I'm gonna turn back to Steve so we can kind of start making our way through some examples of each of these.
Thank you, Alan. So I'd just like to open this up to our panelists, and give some specific examples of how the 4Ps, have you seen the 4Ps play out in your own experiences? So we'll start with purposeful. Can you share examples of purposeful tie-ins to the issues of the world at large, or causes uniquely tied to your organization or your clients?
I'll take that one first, please, Mr. Cotter. I just wanted to clarify, I am Joanna Behrens. I'm Chief Zero Food Waste Enthusiast and President of Sustainable Events Network, Florida and Caribbean. So we're a very grassroots organization, and our mission is to lead the meeting and events industry in the advancement of sustainable practices in Florida and Caribbean. And we are a seasoned group of professionals who are all either event planners ourselves or have worked in the industry and are looking to see that level of sustainability be ramped up to the extent that we can. If anybody's interested, our website is senfc.org. I wanted to speak to a little bit the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because this is something that we're trying to educate everyone about. We need to embrace them as much as possible. They were created in 2015 with the goal of being attained internationally by the year 2030. And in particular, there's a couple of the SDGs, as we call them, that really speak to exactly what Alan is focusing on. Number 2, zero hunger. That is a goal, and our organization works very hard on zero food waste. I'm going to address that more specifically. Number 10 goal, reduced inequalities in our world. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Hello, we're talking about partnering with organizations in the communities within which we meet. We are furthering those goals when we do this. And lastly, number 17, partnerships for the goals. So those were 4 of my favorite that I felt spoke specifically to what we're doing. And the question was purpose-driven, of course. Our biggest initiative is our Zero Food Waste Committee. We launched that committee back in 2016 at the NACE annual convention, which was held right here in South Florida at the Diplomat Resort. And we decided to create our first food rescue and chronicle it and document it on video so that it would become a case study and an example to our industry peers. So we are advocates for food rescue and food recovery within events, festivals, conferences, and every single person on this call, I would imagine, has the power to further this cause. You are either contracting a venue that you can request that food that is surplus after your event be donated, or you're a vendor yourself, a caterer, or an ancillary vendor that can help further the cause. And we can get a little bit more into that. I certainly don't want to hog this segment of the conversation, but I did want to mention that the pandemic most definitely broke a lot of the barriers with respect to awareness on food insecurity. That was a term that was really only used within our little world. And as we saw the hospitality industry so gutted as a result of the pandemic, the awareness with respect to food insecurity was heightened, and many of the barriers that we face with concerns with respect to liability were just bulldozed right through, because food that was left over from venues that were planning for events as we shut down as a world, nobody said, oh, we can't donate this for liability reasons. The food was going into the soup kitchens, and I can address that more. But that's what I wanted to say on this topic. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you like to add anything to this, P, Jacqueline?
Sure. Well, first of all, Steve, thank you for having me here. Honored to be here. And Alan, what a great recap. I think when clients say, we want to do CSR, we're not really sure what we want to do or why we should do it, I got to take that PowerPoint or just have you come and meet with our clients and talk about it. I'm Jacqueline Bernstein, and yes, I'm president owner of Empire Force Events. We are New York City's longest independent and locally owned destination management company. And what's exciting is actually today is the 28th anniversary of me buying the company I worked at when I graduated college. So I just have to share that with you. That's just exciting for us. Thank you for that. And what's interesting is that obviously Alan and Joanna are so focused on doing this as their main service that they provide. Whereas our company, as you know, to the planners that are out there, we're the planner's planner. You come to us to help you satisfy and execute and dream up and produce in our destination. I'm based in New York City. I service New York City, State, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So we're in the pharmaceutical corridor. So we do a lot, as what Alan was mentioning before. But I'm also part of the Host Global Alliance, and there's a lot of DMC brands out there, and we obviously do this all over the country and the world. So with that being said, you know, it's very interesting when you were talking about the P's and you added that other P, pivot. And I must say, Alan, I can't stand that word pivot. I felt we shook it up. When everyone said, are you pivoting? I said, no, I'm shaking it up. And I want to just give you an example of something that we did during the pandemic that I felt was very personal to me. There's a P, and purposeful. And that's something that I want to see how we can continue on. But when everything was happening here, as New York City is always the epicenter, if something's going to happen, good or bad, we're going to be number one at it. That's why I love New York more than ever. And at the very beginning, I kept thinking I have to do something. So what I did with the community at large is I started something called Event Pros Ready to Serve. And I don't want to say I'm, our company. And we looked to people that were furloughed, laid off, staff people that were not hiring on site for events because there were not events. And we just got us together and stated if the city needed us, because I do a lot of work with NYC and companies sitting on their board of directors and the mayor's office, et cetera. But if the city needed us to mobilize and do something, would you be okay? Would you be okay being on site? It would have to be virtual. And what we did was we worked with a company that we did fashion shows with, and they developed an organization called From Fashion with Love. And they got vendors to donate flip-flops, sports bras, t-shirts, body lotion, knapsacks, jewelry, candles, anything you can imagine. And our company in April, end of March, April, May, and June put together 3,000 gift bags for visiting nurses. A lot of the hotels here in New York City, you hear the sirens, that's just New York. It's a background filter here, it's entertainment. I don't mean in a bad way, you get what I'm saying. But we put together 3,000 gift bags for the visiting nurses that were in the hotels in some of the Midtown area. And we did an event. Shh, don't tell anyone. We had a red carpet, we had a step and repeat, we had a DJ. When there were no gatherings, we did this as an event to give back to the nurses. And I felt that we donated this totally. We were not paid to do this. I didn't care about that at that time. No one was getting paid. We were all in the same situation. But we had to give back and do something. And the reason I bring that story up is not just to proclaim how much we loved what we did, but to think, how can we continue doing that? Because we're still in this pandemic, and we look at all cities about whether it be a storefront that might be vacated. We were talking about this earlier, that when a company comes here, yes, we might need to do something nice in a playground and have the children come and see it. But why don't we maybe help retailers and just make the storefronts prettier, because some businesses unfortunately went out of business. And, you know, Joanna, talking about food, when I traveled a few times during the pandemic, I took everything out of my fridge and just walked in the streets and gave it to the people that I knew that needed it more than us. And I'm a caregiver at heart. And I think being in this events profession, that's what we do. And there are days I'm wondering, my God, we're planning these lavish or very focused and detailed events and meetings, etc. But I want to be able to take care of people. And I think all of us, it feels much more important. Sometimes they're investing money to meet and feed. Why don't we invest it to give back? So we have to find the purposes, as Alan clearly outlined, to speak to the clients and how we can tie that in. And I really hope what we did with the nurses, we don't want to do that again, right? But how can we continue that and maybe thank the first responders that are still doing? Let's not just do it then in the height, let's keep it going.
A great example. I just to add just a couple, just in that purposeful driven examples here that in that regard too. I want to say we've seen that a lot during, so many years. But there are things like when a colleague, for example, might get worked with an event once where a group had lost a colleague to cancer. And they then did an event that involved making cancer care bracelets to donate to the organization that for anyone who's going through cancer, they donated these cancer care bracelets in honor of their colleague, and it was when they donated them to the organization, the Cancer Care Support Organization, that their lost colleague had basically gone to for support. That was a way of thanking that organization and remembering their colleague. I remember, if you remember back when the Haiti earthquake, 2011, it was 2010. It was a while ago. The big Haiti earthquake. We had a client that was within 30 days of implementing a 1,200 person event in Vegas. And it was going to be an education focused event with 6 local educational charities being supported via financial donations. And once Haiti happened, it was like a quick stop. And it was said, wait a minute, we can help out these other organizations and we'll do so, but we can make a huge impact for organizations who are on the ground in Haiti right now. And we ended up doing an event that ultimately made tiered donations to these 6 different organizations that were on the ground, basically working in immediate disaster response, and donated based on performance during the activity. Every single one of those 6 organizations received a donation, which totaled all in all over $30,000. Of course, it was corporate money, you know, that they did it. Not talking about asking the attendees for the money, but the client saw what was going on, saw an opportunity to show their employees not only we care about this, but we want you to be involved in it. Really, really a great example of that kind of purposefully driven activity. And honestly, just to make it more about the who is getting together, it really matters too. Really neat to do. Just yesterday, I ran a program that involved building these solar cars. There was a group of engineers, and the idea is that they think with the side of the brain that I do not think with. Okay, they're very technical minded, and the idea of donating materials and supplies to get kids excited about STEM education was huge for them. And it resonated so well because they saw they had the fun of building and being creative and knew that they were also donating supplies. Each of them wrote a message, special message to the kids who would receive these to make sure that they were going to have this motivating message. But when these kids were going to build the same types of vehicles, these small solar cars, so that they could motivate these kids and who knows, get them excited about their industry. And it really resonated with them because of the job that they had and the side of the brain that works with you know, that got them to where they are in their business. So a couple of good tie-ins there. Steve, back to you.
Thank you. So moving on to the next P, which is powerful. Can you talk a little about the impact on your community partners and their goals and objectives?
Let me jump in with one quick one before I give it back to you guys on this one, because I'll never forget this event that we did outside of Atlanta once, where there was this family that was a family of a husband and wife who were nurses in the local hospital there, and specifically we're providing support for those with Down syndrome, and they had 4 kids of their own, and they decided, hey, look, you know, maybe there's a little more we can do, and they actually adopted a child with Down syndrome, and then said we could do more. And so they adopted another child and another and another and another until all of a sudden they had a family of 27 living in one house. I still to this day don't understand, what's that show where they do the home makeovers? Maybe it's called Home Makeover. That's what it is. Thank you, Joanna. So they actually lost to another house on their street. I don't get it. They lived in like this 4-bedroom house with 27 people. But we found out about this family, and we found, and our client had this board meeting where they had to make some key decisions about the community, about their company. And we said, let's do something that's so impactful and so moving that it's going to let them engage and bond with one another in such a way that it's going to open them up to one another. They can speak more for, you know. And so this family that we ended up running this program with, we asked them, what do you need? Like, what do you need? Again, this is all about meeting the impact you have as a client, but what does your beneficiary need? And they said, you know what? No one has their own space in this house. We could really use these kind of lockers. They're kind of like storage lockers without the lockers themselves, but they're cubbies more or less. But these tall ones, they can hang some stuff, put some stuff that would be theirs. It's their space, because that's one thing they didn't have. We also asked them, it was closing in on the holidays, what kind of gifts would you like? Not just, oh, we need this and that, but no, what does every single kid want? So we got this specific list of the things, the gifts that the kids wanted. And then we were able to provide this thing where you know, of course, we brought in this, we were able to bring in the family. Luckily, the whole family came, and they were able to actually give these gifts to these kids, and it was what they wanted. It was such a, you know, meeting the needs of the client, because they needed something that was going to open them up to one another, but also meeting the needs of that beneficiary as well, which was really made it even more impactful.
Can I jump in about the powerful on top of what Alan just mentioned?
Sure, yeah.
Again, because we service and produce and dream up based on what the client's objectives are for their CSR and activities, they all vary based, again, what their objectives are and who they want to take care of. But what I always felt, and our company firmly believes is most powerful, and again, tying what you just talked about, is not just making the gift bag or giving those gifts or preparing them or building whatever it is, the bike or painting something, a mural, but making sure that the power is felt by those in the corporation that are doing it, the guests that are at the activity, get to actually participate and give it to those that are going to be, I don't want to say enjoying it, but needing it. And that the reason why you're doing it, the purpose is that they're going to get these elements or whatever it may be. Why just put it on the truck, it leaves the hotel ballroom, and then the guests just go back to doing what they were doing in their meeting and their reception. So I've been very forceful with our company to say to the client, if you're going to want to do this, either we're going to have to figure a way to go to the shelter, the hospital, the home, the school, whatever it is, or getting a subset of those people to come here to our facility and make sure that they can take it in honor of the other people. And we have felt that that is just much more powerful. And clients sometimes have said, I don't think that's necessary. Well, this is the way we've always done it. We'll just package it up and send it off. And I'm thinking the power is in watching their faces. And I think all of us can think about that you might easily write a check to an organization, but if you're walking down the street and just give someone a couple of dollars, or like I do, bring them in somewhere and buy them a cup of coffee and talk to them for a moment, there is so much power in that. And that, I think, there's no going back to anything. There's no normal. There's no new normal. It's just do new. That has become a philosophy. Out of adversity comes some good. Do things differently than you've done before. And if there's a way that you can capture some of those people there to get the power of what you're giving and making for them, it's going to be a powerful result in the long run for the social responsibility you've done.
Agree. And if I may, I'd like to tag on to that because I 110% agree. And I keep thinking of that phrase, people don't remember what you say, they remember how you make them feel. And the power of these initiatives is how we feel as the participants making it happen. So for instance, if you're with an organization that has been able to initiate the food rescues and food recoveries, you can peel that onion further and perhaps organize a feeding at the very homeless shelter or soup kitchen that is going to be the recipient of the food from your conference. You might have an opportunity, a free afternoon where people can volunteer and assist with that. I've also seen huge impact. Maybe it's not possible in the case of food donation for recipients to actually come to the venue, but you can have a spokesperson from that organization who comes and maybe shows the 2 to 3 minute video of that nonprofit, that charity, and what the work does. You can take it a step further and do just a mini fundraising, raffle, raising some cash for that same recipient charity that's going to receive the food that you're donating, and is also maybe that you're executing a feeding at. I wanted to mention, at least in the state of Florida, and I can't speak for other states, but I would imagine they have followed suit. Kids don't graduate high school today anymore without completing a required number of volunteer service hours. And so this is how we are creating a culture of our millennials and our Gen Zs for whom volunteerism is just absolutely second nature. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And that is why there is this expectation. And like Jacqueline said, the heck with what was normal. It's what we're doing today. And while we were all asleep during the pandemic, thank God some people had a chance to think and reflect on how we're living our lives and realize that we got to change and tweak a few things and wake up to all these initiatives that support the Sustainable Development Goals, because it's all part of the big picture.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm a little conscious of the time. I'd like to move on to the Q&A section in about 10 minutes. If any attendees have any questions, that now would be a good time to start typing them into the box, and we'll get to those shortly. We've got 2 more P's to talk about. So the next one is professional. And if you could talk a little about how CSR bridges the gap between the corporation and the community.
Honestly, I think a lot of the examples we just talked about do hit on exactly that, especially the way you guys talked about it. Because it's when you deliver that message, when you make that connection, when you have a representative that's going to be there, that can say thank you, and which is really part and parcel to it's essential for every event, have some sort of representation. It's not just, oh, we're making this donation, but who are you making that donation to? And understanding that connection and feeling like, wow, this really hit me, you know, going to deliver those. I think that we just got some great examples for this, for sure. I will say, like, that when you really hit it and you do it right, you can have amazing results. Just like one of those examples we just heard. I'll never forget a program that I was a part of where we asked listen, it was a bike build. I know it's been around forever. There actually are groups that still haven't done a bike build for charity, believe it or not. But I remember doing one of these in New Orleans one time, and we asked the participants to remember that first time that they actually got on a bike, really to paint that picture of understanding why it is like that moment and that freedom, that independence, that all that. We get this gentleman who stands up and says, you know what, I remember this so clearly. He said, because when I was a young child, my father walked out the door and never came back again. And my mother was forced to raise me as a single mother who had 2 jobs, also then started going to night school so she could get her degree. And when I finally turned 12 years old, she said, this gentleman said, when I turned 12, my mom said she got her first real job. And with her first check from her first real job, we went and cashed that check, and then the first place we went was to a bike store, and she bought me a bike. And he says, I'm 42 years old. I still have that bike. I mean, little did this guy know that that kids were going to come in to get those bikes in person, and that he was going to be giving a bike to a specific child who was the daughter of a single mother. Like, all of a sudden, this experience, it hit him, and then he was able to then, as a surprise, they got this bike. And he went up to the meeting planner. I was standing right there when it happened, and said that in his professional career, he had never been a part of something more meaningful, because the message was delivered right. The client had considered the audience, and everything came together in that moment. And then meeting that child, it just tied that bow beautifully on that experience, and really was life-changing for this gentleman.
Thank you. Would any of the other panelists like to add anything to that, P, or should we move on to?
I could just address real quickly here. I just would love to share. My company also was very fortunate during the pandemic. Sounds like an oxymoron, but it's not. But based on logistics that all planning companies do, to work with the City of New York in building vaccination sites. So you probably all saw it on national media, but the vaccination site in the American Museum of Natural History underneath the big whale that you saw, that was one of the big promoted ones. But I don't want to say we produced that event, but we use our logistics acumen to design the flow of the registration and the being vaxxed, and then the what did you call it when you had to watch them? Oh my God, I'm totally blanking on what it was. We had to sit for 15 minutes, observation, pardon me. So when we talk about professionalism in planning these events when you're doing CSR, I've had a lot of clients say, well, we're going to come in, let's build a bike, but we have to get all this decor and all this entertainment. And sometimes we're losing sight of what the actual purpose is, again, the other P. So as much as we were honored and we built vaccination sites in all the 5 boroughs, we still have some going where they're waiting to even open more when the kids under 5 get them. So that has been an honor to do that. Otherwise, I don't know how we would have survived. But we weren't necessarily worrying about the decorative design. We did some entertainment for some of them, but the flow and the throughput and getting people vaccinated was important. And I want to use that mentality that sometimes it's not always about how glamorous and glitzy. And when I say exciting, the excitement is not what the room looks like, it's what they're actually doing and giving back. So I think we have to put those things in perspective. If clients have the money to invest, they don't necessarily need to decorate and entertain the planners, or excuse me, the guests that are there. Put the money into what you're going to be giving back in the first place.
And I'll just briefly add, the word is professional, and we all consider ourselves event professionals. And as a professional, we're strategic and forward thinking, not reactive and not order taking. So don't ask, just do. Make this CSR component part of what you do, make it a part of the bigger sustainability plan that you have with it for your entire conference. Sorry, I got to keep advocating for that. And you'd be amazed at how many components of your conference can become part of your give back. Your centerpieces, your flowers can be redelivered. Maybe that wasn't even the separate part of the CSR. project, but you can turn that into part B of what you're doing. There's so many ways to drive that professionalism that we as event planners and members of the industry have cultivated.
Thank you, thank you. So to finish, if we can talk about the last P, which is passionate, and if you talk a little about the importance of showing stakeholders and employees the depth of your dedication to the community through CSR events. Anybody would like to start?
I'm almost going to say I think this one we have covered. If you want to jump into the questions, I don't know if my other
sure.
Indeed, we're all bringing the passion to the table here and saying you have an opportunity during events to say we should be doing good, and people can take that kind of that passion, that excitement for doing good out into their own lives. So
can I just add one quick thing? Many times you, the planners, whether you're the intermediary or the corporate direct, are coming up with the concept of what the give back and the corporate social responsibility event is going to be. And I know you ask a lot of the attendees sometimes different questions and questionnaires before they come to the meeting. Maybe ask them, hey, we're going to New York City. What is your passion to give back to the city? And hear what they have to say. It could be as simple as, we're going to give everyone $100. They're going to run around the block for an hour and just tip out and take care of people and capture them on video. I do it personally. So there's no reason it doesn't have to be something so thought about. Get the passion of your guests so they really have more passion when they're doing it.
Exactly. Absolutely.
I mean, more that you involve. Go ahead, Joanna.
Oh no, I absolutely agree. You've got to speak to your audience, and your audience are your attendees. What do they care about? And if you can get that input, take the lead, take the initiative, proclaim that you're going to be doing something like this, and then make sure everybody's engaged and all in, and it is something that they care about, but also tie it in to the needs of the community. Again, I speak from a Florida perspective. Tourism's our #1 industry. It was mind-blowing to see what the pandemic did to our local and statewide community. And I touched on the fact that we were able to blow right through concerns on food being donated, but to hear the statistics and just realize that we waste 35 to 40% of the food that's produced in this country, and we can bridge that gap by making sure that we're not wasting the food at our events, and pushing and driving for that from our vendors is something that I like to just reiterate over and over. I also want to just mention senfc.org, again, is our website. You do not need to be from Florida or the Caribbean to engage with our organization, and we're having virtual networking at 4 o'clock today. If anybody would like to join us, and we can continue some of this, because we're going to be talking about sustainable summer entertaining. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So let's move on to our Q&A section, and if any attendees have any questions, please feel free to type them into the question box below, and we'll get to those. But let's just start with when first approaching a CSR event, what's one piece of advice that you would give to potential clients?
Well, I think that we just covered some 4 Ps, which I think is a good, that's the first thing I would say, is consider what we just kind of talked about here. No, but I would say that it's like not to put too much pressure on you, but you could see just from, you've heard from the 3 of us today, you think of just the passion that we're bringing this conversation, what it means to us, and what it means to do the things that we've been a part of. This can be one of the more impactful parts of the agenda. I think that when you're putting together that agenda, you got to cover the business pieces. We know that, right? You got to cover that business, the business pieces of the strategy and the speakers and getting that message. Excuse me, training, whatever that is, recognition. But when people take part in something like this, it really ties people together in a way that most other elements of your agenda cannot. Because when you can impact somebody's life under the company name and with your colleagues, like that's something that is going to endear them to your company. So I almost will put this in one of the things to consider, but also one of the biggest pitfalls, which is something to keep in mind, is don't treat this as a checkbox item. This element is just as important as the keynote speaker, as the type of award you're going to hand out, as the how you share the location of your next incentive. It's all equally important, and don't treat this as a different piece and that maybe requires less of a focus from the planning side, because you have an opportunity to emotionally connect with your attendees, connecting them to the community in a way that most elements of your agenda cannot. So definitely, I don't mean to put the pressure on you there, but give it the attention that it deserves.
And I would like to add to that something that I don't think we touched on. It is okay to go for the PR aspect of this as well, to get your execs involved in photo opportunities, the handoff, the meeting between the visitor from the organization and your execs, and get all those photo opportunities and press releases related. You're doing good, so you might as well get the value of the PR that goes with that too.
All these are perfect reasons why you should be doing this. But even before that, however, even before that, if you as a planner is going to come to any of us and say, hey, we need to, because someone higher up said we should, or we want to, you got to decide, if you don't know what it is you want to do, maybe what it is what you don't want to do. And I would ask this for any element that you're doing in a project and an event. It's not just specific to CSR, but think of what your objectives are internally. At the end, we want to make sure that our employees that were there have smiley faces, we get great photo ops. Okay, what would that look like in this destination or in your community? So you have to come to us with something, or may I say, you might even want to talk about what you financially want to invest, because it's not just the money of the actual elements that you're putting together, but the coordination of putting the whole CSR project together. So that's just important that you should know that when you're starting to think about the concept.
And also, sorry, don't forget to provide intermittent updates throughout the program. For instance, we built X number of bikes because maybe not everybody participates in it. So you want to make sure the other people hear about what was done. And FOMO is a good thing, right? Because you'll get more the next time. So do the updates and within the context of the event as well, so everybody understands and is educated. Sorry, Alan.
No, not at all. I just, the only thing I was going to also add is, so many times, Jackie, I'm imagining this happens to you all the time as well. We get told, oh, this is our budget for the CSR program. Okay, great. Well, how did you come up with it? We kind of picked a number, or that's what we were told we have. It really would make sense to, I know sometimes we don't have the lead time, okay? But try and get those questions asked of a company that knows what they're doing in the CSR space, to say, hey, what would it cost for us to do something like this? Because I tell you all the time, well, people say, this is an amazing idea, but we don't have that kind of money. It's like, well, that's why we need to have these conversations before you set your budget for this, so that you can include this meaningful experience in your, in your agenda. So do that, try and do that research ahead of time, so that when it comes to what your budget is, you're working with a viable budget to make this an impactful experience.
We usually get the opposite way around, where they say, we don't know what we want to do, and we don't know what the financial investment is, which I like to say more so than budget. And then when we come back and design it, like, oh, we only had X. So again, think about what you want. And as Alan said, if you have a financial investment, at least let us know so we could design towards that. But that's with anything you do in events, but definitely with the CSR. And again, and I'm sure Alan could talk much more about this, what is going to be potentially a tax write-off, right? That might be part of the project, separate than you might make a donation directly to organization, but pay a company like ours or Alan's, et cetera, Joanna's, to pay us to coordinate all that. So we could talk all about that.
That segues quite well into a question that's just come in from one of our attendees. If I'm bringing a CSR activity into an internal meeting, what is a realistic budget per person, and what would be a range?
Well, certainly I can jump into this with a long list of responses. I mean, listen, it's going to depend on so many things. You're bringing it into your office. It's hard to give to just say right off the bat, it's going to cost you this much, because we don't know how many people you have coming together. We don't know, there's different ways to make an impact. So, what we would say is, I mean, a lot of times, the simple answer, it's going to cost you between $40 and $150 a head. Okay, but you also have to consider, again, how many people are you bringing together? Is this going to be is this a small 15 to 20 person event? Is this an 800 person event? Okay. That there's so many different elements that go into it. And I should also add that with any kind of budget, there is some way you can make a difference. I want to make that clear. Obviously, for the programs we do, if I'm building prosthetic hands or coding computers versus I'm making a hygiene care kit, like of toiletry items, big price differential there, huge price differential, So I would say that there is a range, but I would say for a facilitated experience, let me be clear about that, for a facilitated experience where you can make sure you get that professional delivery of the message with passion, you definitely have to plan for a couple of $1,000s minimum for any event. Again, that's the facilitated style of event. I will say that, like, for example, with our company, we start at $3,500, I'll be frank with you. And then it goes up from there based on what your experience is, where it's going to be, and all those kind of different elements. But there are different things you can do as self-hosted items too. Okay, that's something that I know that my company and others offer, where you can get the materials and supplies for smaller groups, and we'll send you all those materials and supplies prepped and ready to go for your give back. And then if you want us to connect you to the nonprofit, we can, but you can run the program yourself. You're losing that professional delivery side of it, which you would be in charge of, but it does allow your group of no matter the size to give back at a much lower rate.
Thank you. So we got about 5 minutes left, so I'll have another question. What are the most recent trends that you've seen with regards to the sectors that businesses are giving back to the most at the moment?
Joanna, I know what you're going to say.
I have a skewed perspective because our biggest volunteer committee is zero food waste. So I think you two should comment, and I'll piggyback on it.
I full disclosure, as events and all started to open back up, within this year, are we really in June? We have not gotten a lot of inquiries for this because I feel that a lot of clients have to catch up and meet what they've missed for the past, within the 2 years, et cetera. But the examples that I gave before about services that my company provided that I see as a CSR is something that I've been telling clients about, to say, I know you have to get the meeting done and you're looking for some activity to do. It doesn't always have to be sightseeing. Let's think about ways to give back to the greater community, because we all sat and watched it, and maybe some of you did do things. So I think it's upon us to introduce it, even if someone doesn't ask for it specifically.
Right.
Yeah, I will say, from our perspective, I'll tell you, I think I see, so far 2022 being, it's been a wildly busy year with people so excited. Anyone who's been with the group so far, the passion, and just everyone is so happy to be with one another. There's just, love is in the air, it's really incredible. And one of the things that I would say is we've seen a lot of pharma and a lot of tech, okay, have been just hugely, they're just they're training again, they're meeting again. That's been let's say the two biggest industries that have been meeting, that we've been supporting so far in 2022. Sorry, and I would say we're finding that a lot of the donations coming out of our programs are because we have the tech and pharma. That's that kind of STEM focus I mentioned earlier, making sure we can support schools who've had such a trying time during the pandemic has been huge. Also, anything associated with making anything associated with the healthcare industry, donating to first responders, via some sort of gifts with gift cards and items that thank them for their service, but also items that they can then give to patients to support them and to be something that they can then can make their lives easier too, and put smiles on the faces of their patients, are things that can help them as well. So we've definitely supported both of those industries a lot. I'd say that if I threw a third in there, I would throw in the Red Cross, because can we go through a week without a disaster somewhere? The Red Cross is everywhere. We have a lot of clients who like to run our programs that give back to the Red Cross, given their footprint, across the country and responding to 70,000 disasters a year.
And I will add to that, and again, this may be because I'm in Florida, We're seeing, fortunately, more awareness for the impact of climate change and the need to keep our resources cleaned up. So beach cleanups, park cleanups, trash pickups, zero plastic, initiatives that support the reduction of single-use plastic movements. That's where people are putting their focus, fortunately, as well. Besides hunger and food insecurity.
Thank you. We're about out of time, but I just got one last question through from one of our attendees who's asked, have you noticed a different level of engagement at an event when an executive or a vice president, etc., participates versus when they don't?
Wow. I mean, yeah, I'll jump in first. 100%. I mean, if you see a situation where everyone's participating, but the leadership is kind of just sitting out and watching, it sends an awful message. It sends a message of like, of we don't need to be involved in this. When they're a part of that experience, and someone who may never have access to anyone in leadership is sitting with a leadership, a vice president, even the CEO is at their table and their work, and they say, wow, you're doing this too? It's sending this message that, yeah, this is part of, this isn't just something we said is part of our culture and we wanted you to participate in, but this is part of our culture, and that is why I'm participating in it. It's a huge, huge moment to have everyone on that same level, no matter where you are in the company.
Ditto, agree. It's got to come. Again, we're event professionals, so you've got to get your top execs on board, aligned with the mission that you're trying to accomplish with the CSR project, but they've also got to participate and see it through.
I'm typically a joiner myself, but I notice that sometimes you see at events, there are people that are going to sit out, but that can happen with just an activity, a regular activity. When it comes to CSR, if you want to be socially responsible, everyone has to be socially responsible.
Well, thank you for that, everybody. I think we're about out of time, so let's wrap it up there. Thank you for our panelists sharing their expertise and for all of our attendees, and thank you to our sponsors as well. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thanks everyone out there. Keep in touch.
Yes.
Thanks. So long.